The DCU's canon may seem a little overwhelming, but I promise it's not as complicated as some are making it out to be. It's actually pretty straightforward. And super quick, if anyone doesn't know, canon just means the official history of the universe in which the show you're watching or the movie you're watching takes place in. Okay, so we know there's the old DCEU that started with Man of Steel and then had Batman v Superman and Justice League, Aquaman, Shazam, Black Adam, all that stuff. Those are all projects and characters that were in that old DC movie universe, which was called the DCEU. But now we have a brand new Superman who is completely separate from all of that, and he exists within his own new cinematic universe called the DCU. The official 100% canon projects of the DCU so far are Superman, Creature Commandos, and Peacemaker Season 2. For example, Jason Momoa is no longer Aquaman in this universe, but instead he's playing the space biker Lobo. We're also getting a new Wonder Woman, a new Supergirl, probably a new Batman, or they'll bring over Robert Pattinson's Batman. That still remains to be seen. Currently, Pattinson exists in what's called the Reevesverse, which is separate from the DCEU and the DCU. It's its own thing. So yes, there is a new DC universe, and the 100% canon projects that we have gotten so far for that universe are Creature Commandos, Superman, and Peacemaker Season 2. But there's still quite a bit from that old DCEU that is still canon to the new DCU. And no, I don't mean multiverse shit and like the timelines were rewritten or it's some parallel universe and they share like one DC multiverse that makes everything still kind of canon. That's not what I'm talking about. We're just talking a good old fashioned that movie doesn't count type of retcon, kind of like what they're doing with the new Alien movies. They ignore Alien 3, they ignore Alien Resurrection, they ignore Alien versus Predator. Those movies are retcon. They don't count.
Doesn't count.
So let's run down what is and isn't canon from the old DCEU in this new DCU. Creature Commandos, canon. Superman, canon. Peacemaker Season 2, canon. The upcoming Supergirl, Clayface, Lanterns, and Man of Tomorrow, all canon. There's also the Batman Part 2, which I don't know if it's going to be DCU canon. James Gunn has, as of right now, stated that it's an Elseworlds thing, that Matt Reeves' movies, his Batman movies, take place outside of the DCU, but who knows what they're doing. Maybe James Gunn is still considering making those canon to the DCU. We'll just have to see. Now, the Snyder trilogy and The Flash and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and all of those from that previous era of DC, those are all not canon. They didn't happen. What occurred in those films is not part of the history of the new universe. So you have your canon, you have your definitely not canon, and then you have your somewhat canon. Peacemaker Season 1, it's somewhat canon. In fact, it's mostly canon, but there are a few things here and there that occurred in Season 1, such as that Justice League cameo, that aren't canon. So Peacemaker Season 1, mostly canon. The Suicide Squad, which James Gunn also did, mostly canon. Blue Beetle, which James Gunn had nothing to do with, but hey, it's a good movie, it's a new character, he didn't have a lot of involvement with that DCEU, and he can fit nicely into the DCU, so mostly canon. Hell, even that first Suicide Squad movie is mostly canon. Now, typically something is either canon or it's not canon. I used to kind of balk at the idea of something being mostly canon. I'd be kind of a snob about it and be like, no, it's either canon or it's not. But if you think about it, there is some nuance to it. You can say, hey, that part of the story, that's actually true. That happened in the history of this world. That part from that story, that's not true. That was made up. That's kind of how you can view it. For example, Ben Affleck's Batman is in that Suicide Squad movie. So that part of Suicide Squad is not canon. Hell, maybe even the scenes that Batman is in are still canon to the extent that, for example, we saw Batman chase down a car with Harley Quinn in it being driven by the Joker that crashes into the water. But in the DCU, even if that scene is part of the history, we know that that particular Batman was not the Ben Affleck version of Batman. And I don't just mean, oh, he doesn't look like Ben Affleck. No, you can do a simple recasting. But I'm saying that the character of Batman, that particular version of Batman that Ben Affleck played, and the history that we learned about with that version of Batman and his, entanglement with his various villains and with Superman, none of that is canon. All that would be considered canon is perhaps that, at one point in history, Harley was in a car being driven by the Joker and they were chased by Batman. And then we can learn, yeah, that happened, but it wasn't Affleck's Batman, it wasn't Jared Leto's Joker. But what is canon is Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and characters like Rick Flag and Amanda Waller. And most of their actions in that movie are part of this DCU history. So for example, in the DCU, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller does run Task Force X just like she did in the DCEU, and she has likely met characters like Batman and Superman, just not the Henry Cavill or Ben Affleck versions of those characters. Now, Peacemaker Season 1, which originally took place in the DCEU, it is still 99% canon to the new DCU. Gunn has just simply stated that things like that Justice League cameo aren't canon, and we've even seen them actually change that in the Previously On section for the premiere of Season 2, where they were swapped out with the Justice Gang. And James Gunn has also come out and said that little quips that Peacemaker made about Aquaman in Season 1, those are likely not canon as well. Reason being that at this point in the DCU, the character of Aquaman isn't known by the public. And you know, I have to say, I appreciate the nonchalantness of his explanation of canon, and that's coming from me who, like I said, I'm a self-admitted canon snob. I hate when movies and shows break canon, but this situation, it's different. Gunn is kickstarting a brand new universe with its own established canon that he plans to shepherd and keep consistent from this point forward. But he's also not going to rob himself and the fans of having Peacemaker in the gang and Blue Beetle and Amanda Waller and even members of the Suicide Squad getting to remain canon. Gunn is not instituting this arbitrary rule and forcing himself to get rid of amazing pieces of story and great cast from that old universe. There's even a great scene in the most recent episode of Peacemaker 203 that confirms that Enchantress, aka June Moon, from that first Suicide Squad movie is canon to the DCU. So basically the short of it is that you can view that old DCEU as a vague, loose history to the new DCU. So I hope that explains it for you, and hopefully as this new DCU moves forward, we'll get a clearer understanding of what specifically is canon and what isn't in this new universe, and we can have a better understanding of the precise canon that isn't quite as fluid as it currently is in this early stage. All right, thanks so much for the question. Our next one is an Avengers Doomsday. Hey everybody, Colton here, and this is the Mailbag style show where I take your questions about Marvel, Star Wars, DC, movies and streaming in general. Whatever you want to ask, send it in to the email address askcoltonnow@gmail.com, link in the description below. And hey, maybe you'll see your question featured right here on the show.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.